What's going on, everybody? Today we're talking about the Washington Commanders in our season preview series finale. And hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button. It really would help me out a ton. If you're new around here, like what you saw today, want to see more football content, pumped for the regular season, just hit that big red subscribe button. And tell me what you think about Washington down below in the comments section. How many wins do you think they come away with? Are they your darling to win the division? Who are some X factors? What are some games looking forward to watching Washington play this year? Say that 5 times fast as well. Love to have your thoughts. It's a conversation down below. I respond to just about every comment. So let's talk about the Commanders down in the comments section. Well, if you're new to the series, welcome to it. This is the final video of it. Seriously, thank you to anybody who watched some of the videos, all the videos, liked one, commented on one, any involvement. I appreciate it. This really is just a sports hub community to talk about football and talk about sports in general here on the Tees YouTube page. So seriously, thank you everybody who took part and watched any of these videos. I really appreciate it. But I digress. Let's start talking about the Commanders. 7-10 wins. I could see the upside, 10-7. They get a couple favorable matchups. Maybe some injuries break their way with opponents. And this team goes 10-7, wins the NFC East. Maybe. Right now, I got it at 7-10 in my updated record predictions video, which came out earlier this week on this channel. Definitely go back and check it out if you missed it. Encouraged by a couple of things. We'll go position group by position group and give you a feel for where I stand on this roster. So obviously, Carson Wentz is a big storyline coming over from Indianapolis. Can Scott Turner, I think, is actually a pretty underrated OC. Can he maximize Carson Wentz? It's it tempers my expectations if Frank Reich couldn't, the guy who was his OC in Philadelphia and they won a Super Bowl together. But maybe Scott Turner, they use a lot of RPOs, they use a lot of receiver movement, play action. So maybe I'm encouraged. Then you get to the running back position, and off the top, saw the video today at the time of this recording of Brian Robinson being back in that room and in the facility with his teammates. Awesome. I'm so glad he's okay. Obviously, every person across the world is happy that he has made it through such a scary moment in his life, in a position where he's still on the active roster. He's still on the 53-man, so hopefully we get to see him on the field this year. But, Antonio Gibson struggling with fumbles, and also, you're talking about Washington, depends on how much you take onus and how much you like the stat, but Pro Football Focus, Washington had a high rate of perfectly blocked run plays, and had one of the lower yards per carries off of it. And part of that is Antonio Gibson still new to the position. The vision not clearly there for someone who's a natural, played the position for years. So adding Brian Robinson Jr., once he is healthy, into the mix could be a nice, wrinkle in the fold there to take advantage of what I think is actually a pretty solid offensive line. Not perfect by any stretch, but a solid unit as a whole. And we'll talk about that offensive line. Charles Leno Jr. has just kind of become this nice other side of 30 renaissance type of player. These tackles continue to add years and years to their career. We'll talk about Sam Cosmi, the right tackle, here in a little bit. And then, Andrew Norwell, I think that was a nice budget signing as a replacement for Brandon Sheriff. Like that move. Chase Roullier has quietly become one of the best centers in football. And then Trai Turner, actually pretty decent last year in Pittsburgh, but they also have the insurance policy of Wes Schweitzer, as the backup right guard. So they have some depth there across the interior of the offensive line. So like that unit a fair amount. The wide receiver room, Scary Terry is an absolute stud. If only he can get a quarterback that would actually maximize the full talent he has at his disposal. Jahan Dotson, I didn't love that pick at 16, but dude naturally controls his body well and goes and gets the football at the catch point, has really good ability to track and haul it in. So that's an encouraging sign. And then Curtis Samuel. Can Curtis Samuel stay healthy? Because I want to see what he looks like in the Scott Turner offense as well. Playing that slot receiver role, use him on end arounds, use him in the backfield. Love to see what that looks like. And you also have De'Ami Brown, who I'm still optimistic about as a vertical base wide receiver. So talent there for sure. You also have Dax Milne. Taking Zach Wilson's girl after, she hits, Dax Milne's doing God's work. I'm playing there, but that's an encouraging, adding Jahan Dotson in that wide receiver room. I'm encouraged to see what that unit can do. And again, really, it'll come down to Carson Wentz. Flipping over the defense, once Chase Young's out there, that front four is lethal. You're talking about Young and Sweat, two young and up and coming, only getting better pass rushers. And the two guys on the inside, Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, they may fight on the sidelines, but they're also a great duo there in the middle. Also, you added Fedarius Mathis in this year's draft. As much as it could feel like maybe that's the Daron Payne replacement just based off of, D tackle is going to be a free agent, D tackle was just drafted, play very different. So it'll be interesting to see what that nose tackle position moving forward, that run-stopping, guy in the middle is. Or is it just going to be Fedarius Mathis and Jonathan Allen, two, interior guys with, focus on pass rushing, being, the duo of the future? We'll have to wait and see there, but it is kind of an interesting what if. Then we get to the linebacking core. We'll talk about Jamin Davis later, but Cole Holcomb, last year was a little bit of a slip from where he was in 2020, but still a, pretty athletic, younger player that I'm optimistic about. And then you get in the secondary, Kendall Fuller's coming off a great year. William Jackson, the third, we'll talk about later on. Cam Curl brings a fair amount of versatility. Bobby McCain can play that nickel. He can play strong safety. He can also be a free. He, again, brings a lot of versatility to the table. And then also there in the nickel or potentially a boundary corner, Benjamin St. Juste, who I liked coming out of Minnesota. Long, lengthy guy with, I think, a fair amount of talent. So there's a lot of pieces, especially on the defense, that I like about this squad. I'm just concerned with how it all comes together with, Carson Wentz being at the center of it. But moving on to the realistic goal, be a top 10 defense. That's where they were a couple years ago. A little bit of a slip. They were just outside the top 10 and, Pro Football Focus overall defensive grade. Can they get back in the top 10? I certainly think that they should be with the talent there, and especially if Chase Young misses minimal time, then absolutely. And if they're not, Jack Del Rio has got to go as a DC. And then reach goal, Carson Wentz, it's all upside. He is this very much a roller coaster of a guy. Don't look at the box score stats because I know 27 touchdowns to 7 picks. That's like, oh, this guy takes care of the football. There are plenty of turnover-worthy type of plays and moments in games that just don't ultimately end up as interceptions or whatever the case may be. But that being said, if the decision-making and the processing is, a step above where it was last year and he's all upside, you get the arm talent, you get the mobility, with the wide receivers, okay, I'm optimistic. I think that could be a really fun offense to watch, and it has a good defense on the side, and that's maybe where Washington gets to that 10-7 record. And that's ultimately, if you have all upside with Carson Wentz, it's a winnable division. It's totally up for grabs. As much as I may like the Eagles, if Carson Wentz exceeds my expectations, limits bad plays, limits turnovers, Commanders are certainly live in the NFC East. But moving on to our X Factors here, these are not superstars. I expect Chase Young to be really, really good when he comes back, even though I know last year was a little disappointing for Commanders fans, or Washington fans. I think that's probably the best way to say it. But, on the other side, Scary Terry is one of my favorite wide receivers in the game. He's not an X Factor. He's a stud. That's not the label to put on him. These are players that, with some exceptions I'll hit on with Cosby, but these are players that I think, 50-50 propositions. If they, exceed the expectations coming into the season, Washington could totally win the division. If they fall short, like maybe they have already with Jamin Davis and William Jackson last year, that's where this team, falls short of expectations and maybe is that 7-win camp. So hopefully that explains what I'm going for here. But Sam Cosmi's on here because, like I said, Charles Leno's been really, really good. And he had a great year last year. But he's on the wrong side of 30. And, while he's having a renaissance, the potential is probably tapped. And at this point, he's coasting on what he is. And that's not to say he can't keep playing. We've just seen Andrew Whitworth playing to his 40s. Trent Williams feels like the next guy to do that. Jason Peters could totally be signed at any moment. Hasn't yet at the time of this recording. He'll be playing at 40 if he does. So it's totally plausible Leno rides that out. Sam Cosmi, the young player that really looked promising last year, especially in the run game, which was going to be right away his strength in the NFL. Had to retool some of the pass block technique coming from Texas, and now with another offseason, man, I think if that technique's refined, you're talking about a guy who could be an 80-plus grade, both run blocking and pass blocking, and as a second-year player, take a huge step forward as the piece on that offensive line. For years, it was Brandon Sheriff, and before that, it was Trent Williams that was like the cornerstone piece of that offensive line. Sam Cosmi, in my eyes, could have that leap this year, and he was on my breakout candidates list for a reason. I think he could take that step forward and become the next, potentially great offensive lineman for Washington. Jamin Davis, obviously former first-round pick, ton of talent, and it's weird because at Kentucky, 1 week to the next, it felt like you saw him learning the position that much more, and you saw the progression. Then he got to the NFL level, and that progression was brought to an immediate halt. So, obviously, going from Kentucky, which, it's not necessarily Alabama within the SEC, but it is in the SEC. But it's not Alabama. It's not an LSU. So there is a bit of a curve, and hopefully here in year 2, he takes that step forward. I'd love to see it because, again, all athlete. Dude has the skill set and the body, and he is what NFL teams are coveting in that position. Checks a lot of boxes. Now you just got to see the production follow suit. So, young player, it may just take some time, and man, if he hits, it makes that defense that much more legit. Because you look at that Commanders defense, go to our lads if you haven't seen it in a while, that linebacking core is the one weakness. If Jamin Davis takes a step forward, that could propel Cole Holcomb back to where he was in 2020. And next thing you know, all 3 levels of that Commanders defense are legit. And then lastly, William Jackson III, he is a bit of we'll have to wait and see. He's kind of the wild card of that secondary. As much as I do like him as a player all in all, coming that last year in Cincinnati was a really, really good one. And that's ultimately what got him the contract, obviously in Washington. But last year was a bit disappointing, if we're being honest. So can he get back to where he was that last year in Cincinnati? I'm pulling up the game grades, actually, as we are doing this. So if he does get back to where he was last year in Cincinnati, huge bolster. Because then, as much as I do like Benjamin St. Juste, you're not rushing him onto the field. You don't have to play him. Or you can just ease him into an NFL starting role by playing the slot. I think that's totally in play. And then also, as much as Kendall Fuller was great last year, that is kind of opening up a caveat to where maybe he takes a step back this year, which if that happens, then again, you're going to have to see that leveled out by William Jackson III taking a step forward. So can William Jackson III get back on track, be worth the money too? Because it's a 3-year contract, and if you look at his contract on Spot Track, if he disappoints this year, he could definitely be a guy that is not brought back next year. And if that's the case and he becomes a cut casualty, what does that mean for his career as somebody who was drafted in 2016? We're starting to get close to that age 30 number. So what does that mean as we get to that point in William Jackson III's career? And now that I got the grades up, you're talking about an elite grade as a rookie in 90 overall, but that last year in Cincinnati, overall grade at 71, coverage grade at 72. Last year, coverage grade below 60. So can you get back to that 70 coverage grade and overall grade back in the 70s as well? That was at a 59.3 last year. So if William Jackson III, after a transition year is back on track, that secondary becomes super legit at the cornerback position. And again, it makes me excited for Benjamin St-Juste too. Easing him into a position where he's playing the nickel, not forcing him on the outside. I think that's good for his career. And then eventually, maybe he becomes a starting outside corner for this team. But done with the X Factors, let's talk about games to watch. No division games here. Those are kind of intuitive games to watch to me, so I don't want to include them here. Very common thread here, except for maybe that Vikings game, but all winnable matchups. The Bears, Falcons, I would put them in my quote-unquote bottom barrel. If you break the NFL up into 4 groups of 8, that bottom 8 are what I call the bottom barrel, just so you understand why I say that and what I mean by the bottom barrel. The Bears and Falcons 100% fall in that. Those 2 teams might be in the bottom 4 in my eyes. No disrespect to those fan bases, but national TV game on Thursday Night Football, Week 6 against the Bears. So how does Carson Wentz handle that type of pressure? A lot of people watching, and Fields has looked pretty good this offseason, so it could be a fun matchup. Fields versus that defense. But that being said, as much as Fields has been better in this preseason, I'm not entirely sure that's going to translate to the regular season. And if Chase Young's healthy, that pass rush better go to town. I want to see Chase Young pushing and abusing, Riley Reif. I want to see, or Braxton Jones, whoever gets that job, and, Larry Borom on the other side getting pushed around by Montez Sweat. However that offensive line shakes out, this is one where I want to see the Commanders front 4 dominate. And then furthermore, a lot of questions about the Bears wide receiver room. So William Jackson better be shut down this game. Kendall Fuller. That being said, the one thing that this cornerback room in Washington is missing is maybe some long speed. William Jackson III can move, but I'm not sure to the same levels as Darnell Mooney. So that could be an interesting one-on-one battle as well. And then flipping sides, this Commanders offensive line I think is a pretty solid unit. It's going against both the pass rush, but also just the defensive front in general against the run as well. That has just taken steps backwards, losing Akeem Hicks, losing a Khalil Mack, now with Robert Quinn, for now. Can this be a game where Antonio Gibson finds the hole, makes the big plays? Brian Robinson Jr. back and playing? I definitely don't know the timetable for that, but can he look good in this game? That'd be a fun one. And, also, last note here, the thing I do like about the Bears defense is that secondary. Carson Wentz, can he stay clean? He is going against, the former Indianapolis Colts defensive coordinator. Does Eberflus have some things up his sleeve to try to generate some turnovers against Wentz? Because if so, the Bears will be able to keep it close. And again, national primetime game. That's always fun to talk about. Week 9 against the Vikings. This is one where at home, the offensive line's gotten better for Minnesota, but, could that pass rush be a disrupting one? This is really kind of a 50-50 game. Maybe I'm leaning towards the Vikings 60-40. But this could totally be one where it's like, I don't think the Commanders are a better team, but they won that week. So can the Commanders steal this one at home? Again, going to be a fun battle. Kendall Fuller versus Justin Jefferson, or, William Jackson versus Adam Thielen. Or maybe it's the other way around, just to kind of better match this, the speed element those guys bring to the field versus the speed that those wide receivers have. But I digress. The front 4, can they make an impact against that offensive line for the Vikings? Can those Vikings wide receivers find an opening against that secondary of Washington? Fun one-on-ones there. But also, furthermore, Carson Wentz, if he stays clean in this game and avoids turnovers, that's the biggest thing I could give as a boost to Washington as why they could steal this game. If Carson Wentz leaves with 275 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, awesome. And that's not even like a gaudy game. If he has 404 touchdowns, 1 pick or even, then all right, yeah, go Commanders. They probably won that game. So can Carson Wentz stay clean? And then to go in against a secondary that leaves a lot of room to be desired. So Scary Terry will be getting open. I am fully confident in that. If Patrick Peterson is opposite of Scary Terry, Terry McLaurin's getting open. So can Carson Wentz fully maximize that? A lot of interesting matchups, strengths versus weaknesses in that game. And then lastly, week 12 against the Atlanta Falcons, very winnable game. The Commanders won last year, with Scary Terry having to come back in the end zone, catching an underthrown duck from Taylor Heineke, but he came down with it, and the Commanders won. Then Washington football team. But can Washington do the same thing? I think they're better than Atlanta. So this should be a game they win, right? And also some of the weaknesses on that, Atlanta defense. I'm not thrilled with their front seven, so this should be a game where the Commanders run it well. And on the other side, it's going to be, I guess, a fun matchup. We'll see if Drake London, where's his health at by week 12. That's going to be just a wild card we're always checking in on. But big, tall, possession, physical wide receivers versus that secondary could be a fun one-on-one. But that also being said, that offensive line is rough in Atlanta, and that pass rush should dominate for Washington. And that could be the difference, right? I think the Washington Commanders pass rush could win this game by themselves in a lot of ways. But that being said, Carson Wentz is going to have to play clean. No 3 interception games. Those are hard to win. Those are hard games to win. But those are my games to watch, and that's going to do it for my Washington Commanders season preview. And that is going to do it for the series. Again, thank you everybody who watched at any point. I really do appreciate it. Wouldn't have a channel if it weren't for people watching. So seriously, thank you one more time. But let me hear your thoughts on the Commanders down below in the comment section. How many wins do you think they can get? Who are some X factors, not superstars, but X factors, and some games you're looking forward to watching Washington play this year? Love to hear your thoughts. I respond to every comment. So truly, let's make it a conversation down below. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It really, really would help me out a ton. If you're new right here, like what you saw, want to see more football content, just hit that big red subscribe button. And lastly, hopefully you all have a fantastic rest of your day. That's going to do it for me. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.